my dream is that every support team can point to or illustrate how the support team, you know, contributed to like the top line, right? Um, and so right now, I think the struggle is like it's not always easy to be able to connect support data to those things. And so like that's where I want like that to me is the ultimate like end is that, you know, it's crystal clear and really easy for a support leader to show like, yep, this is the impact we had on our on revenue, on our brand value, whatever those, across multiple like facets on our product roadmap. And so that to me is like the pinnacle.
Hi, welcome to the CX Files podcast. Today's guest is Stacy Justino. Stacy is an early adopter of support tools and software, and she's picked up various tools over the years. But throughout, there's been a theme of being an early adopter and also being a mentor. She's been a member of the Support Driven Aspire Council for the past 6 years and has been a mentor in the program for 6 people. She works at Petdesk, where she's a product support manager. Over the years, she's had various experiences in her career, but throughout has been focused on leading the adoption of new technology and, of course, creating results for customers. Stacy, thanks for joining today.
Thanks for having me.
So I wanted to ask you about some of your past experiences. When you were first starting your career, like what were some of the things that surprised you?
Well, one of the things that surprised me is that I never thought of myself as like a technical person. And so when I got my first job in customer support, I didn't think that was necessarily going to be my career. I wanted to get into usability. And I realized that I really liked solving problems. And I already knew I liked helping people, right? I originally thought maybe I wanted to be a teacher. Um, did that in Korea for 2 years, teaching English. And I realized that I liked teaching kids. I did not like teaching the same subject material over and over again. And
Hmm.
I couldn't really imagine myself doing that for 20, 30, how many ever odd years. And then when I got onto a customer support team at Big Fish Games, started out doing accounts and billing stuff, then you move into doing technical support and, you know, read through all of our public facing help articles. And I was really sort of, a really curious person. So I think what was kind of surprising to me is that like hard technical skills coming in the door with those um, isn't necessary for every single support role, and it's more important that you can learn and be adaptable. And so I really didn't know that going into it.
Yeah, I definitely think that there's this idea that people have that they have to be super technical and they have to have all of these, kind of credentials and things that they can point to. But I think if you're hiring, what you really care about is that enthusiasm and kind of willingness to learn, to dig in and figure things out. And that goes a long way, maybe more than people imagine.
Oh yeah.
Um, is there one, memorable experience, a time when you felt like you really helped someone in throughout your career?
Um, that's a great question. I think if I think on a smaller scale, like I this is what I always like go back to when I'm working with people who are trying to like level up in technical support, customer support, and are, feeling like they don't have opportunities in their sort of frontline role to really showcase their abilities and showcase that like, hey, I'm ready for a more elevated role on this team, whether it's more like a tier two or senior role or a team lead or manager role. And I always go back to this example where I was working in our Mac support queue because um, my performance had been pretty good in our general technical support queue. So we had two folks on the team who were considered Mac support specialists. Little did I know that Mac support is way easier because there's way fewer configurations for a Mac computer or laptop than there is for like every sort of iteration and combination of a PC. So I was
Hmm.
like, oh, this is actually much more simple. But We had a game. All of a sudden, we were getting reports that this game was crashing at the specific level. We couldn't reproduce it. Our QA team couldn't reproduce it. And, in this role, I was answering like 80 to 90 support tickets a day, right? So pretty good pace going. And I remember like getting this ticket come in, and the person had said, "Hey, this happened after I updated QuickTime." And I was like, "Oh, that's an interesting piece of information." I went to our testing laptop or testing Mac, and I went to go check what version of QuickTime the machine had, realized there was an update, applied the update, launched the game, booted it up, opened that chapter, boom, the game crashed. And I was able to escalate that to our tier two support team, who filed like updated the QA team. And ultimately we decided that we are going to wait till the next QuickTime update because QuickTime updates pretty regularly. But the reason why this was happening and we didn't see it on machines is QuickTime is a software on a Mac that doesn't auto update necessarily
Mm,
unless there's like a mandatory update. So you could be running an older version of QuickTime and you won't necessarily get prompted to update the new one, or it won't like auto update in the background like some of the other um, applications that are like pre-installed, like come with the Mac. So that was sort of this really strong example for me of like, oh wow, like I figured something that nobody else on my team, the QA team, hadn't been able to figure out. And really, it came down to just like active listening, right? I could have just been like, oh, you're having this issue. Sorry about that. Here's a coupon so you can get another game. But I was like, oh, I don't know if we considered that. Let me go check it out. And that to me is like, I was able to help customers because we were able to explain what was going on and be like, hey, this will be resolved once Apple releases a new version of QuickTime. And so that to me kind of sticks out as an example. But if I think in my time as a leader, some of the things that like one of the examples I'm most proud of is when I was at Wistia, really was able to work with one of my team members who wanted to become an engineer and help him on his path to moving on to the engineering team. But the thing about that is when he had expressed this to me, I said, oh, yeah, of course, this is amazing. Let me talk to the director of engineering. I slacked the director of engineering, and he was like, "Okay, when could he join our team? He already is an engineer. Like because of some of the work he'd done on the sports side, he built like a web application that allowed us to test out the APIs that we used at Wistia without having to
mm-hmm,
like go into an account and like get it all set up in like sort of a
mm-hmm.
test environment, but you could like play around with them and make the API calls in like a really easy web interface that the team could easily use. And this is from someone who joined Wistia in our support team and did not have, well, actually had no previous customer support, technical support background, and in 3 years became an engineer.
That's great. Yeah, I think, there's this transformational aspect of support where it transforms people's careers, but it transforms the experiences of customers as well, right? And whether you can directly solve a problem or if you can simply understand and kind of relate with somebody who's having a problem, there's this transformation that can occur. And I think there's something about that which is inherently addictive and kind of exciting, right? It's like when you see people struggling and you're able to help them, and like, that's just the story of that. Um, it's just very rewarding. I think, the technical side of things, obviously it depends on the business. I mean, if you're selling toothpaste or something, it's going to be very different from, somebody who's selling, video marketing tools like Wistia, for example. Um, but there's there's an opportunity there, um, if you're providing support for technical products to increase your skills, right? In the case of this individual who changed into being an engineer, they built those skills on the job in support. And so whether people want to stay in support their whole career or they want to move on, I think that there's an increasing awareness of the connectedness of support to other departments and other skills. How do you kind of think about, in the present day, in this era that we're in, the current environment, how do you think about this, like the evolving technical side of support, the evolving uh technical understanding that's required to deliver support today?
Ooh, um, that's also an excellent question. I think you kind of have to come at it from a few different fronts, right? You need to make sure your team is like enabled and has the knowledge that they need, but not that they just have the knowledge. Like you could have like really great training, but if your training isn't backed up by good process and good documentation, kind of put a lot of time and energy into training people, but they need to be able to find the information they need in their moment of need, right? And that's up for customers too, right? Like in their moment of need, can they find the answer or can they figure out what they need to do next? Um, so I think that that is pretty important. I think as especially if you're supporting a product that has a large surface area, if you will, um, and any products really, like what I would kind of say is like we can't expect people to remember everything. That is that is a recipe for disaster. So you have to be able to make it easy enough for them to find the answers in the time they need and provide them the tools that they need to be able to do the work and have an understanding. I think one of the things that people kind of like miss is like setting that figuring out what the baseline level of like knowledge is somebody needs to do the job successfully, right? What do they like? How deep does their like understanding of how the product works, not just what it does, right, like does for your user and what the user can do, but like under the hood, how much do they really need to understand to be able to provide excellent support and to be able to like escalate things back to product and engineering. And I think that that's a piece that not a lot of orgs probably put the time into, right? You can build out all these awesome resources, but if at the end of the day people don't really understand fundamentally how the underpinnings of everything work, then how can you expect them to really understand and figure out when something goes wrong?
Yeah, I think that it's definitely a balance. I mean, you can absolutely overload people, and I
Oh, yeah.
think, we're all bombarded every day with so much information, that it's just, overwhelm is very real. And it manifests itself in, a difficulty focusing on what matters, an inability to kind of, like you said, you can't remember everything, right? Um, so kind of presenting information in an accessible way, whether it's onboarding or ongoing training, presenting it in a way that kind of can be digested, right?
Yeah.
But then going deep enough at the same time, finding that balance, going deep enough to where they do understand, oh, this is not just like a black box and we, just magic results come out of it. um, this is sort of how the pieces are moving internally.
Mhm.
I think that's absolutely critical. Um, that there's there's increasing complexity in technical products. Um, there's increasing complexity in the tools, increasing capability in the tools that are available for customer support. Whether that's the self-serve tools, the knowledge tools, ticket management, all these kinds of pieces. You know, vendors are developing more and more all the time, obviously. Um, but with the rise of AI, um, how do you see the shift happening day to day? Like, there it used to be, and I've worked in frontline customer support before. It used to be just like, okay, here's a backlog of tickets, smash the backlog as fast as you can, and we're just gonna slam you with more tickets the next day. you know, um, but it seems to me that it's moving more towards, okay, what are the conclusions here for our knowledge base? How does that kind of ticket to knowledge to self-serve, how does that cycle kind of work? What are your thoughts on the trend here, or the kind of the changes that are occurring?
I think like at a like if you look more high, not high level or whatever, One thing that I think a lot of people are realizing is that I mean, this is true for most software, not just AI software, right? That like a tool is only good as like how you implement it, the change management, how you maintain it, right? Most tools, even simple ones, are not set it and forget it. It is something that you have to constantly sort of, not constantly, but regularly make sure, like, hey, is this still serving our needs? Okay, our business has shifted, our priorities have shifted. Hey, we need to make sure that the tools that we're using is still serving us. And so I think that with AI, that software that is even more critical. And a lot of the times, like we just started implementing AI software on our team, for example, and realizing like, okay, we need to really lock down our process for keeping our knowledge updated, both our external and our internal knowledge. Um, and so recently we've kind of been working through like, okay, let's actually get templates for our guru cards so that they're all formatted the same way. Um, and yes, that's only part of it, but like thinking about those things, and so that like let's develop a culture that everybody on our team really feels empowered and has the time and bandwidth and expertise to be able to update articles. So it's not just falling on the handful of senior people on your team, because that's going to make our AI software more effective. And that's going to
Mhm.
then free up some time for us to work on those content creation and content management side of things. So I think that that is one piece. And I think the other kind of piece, especially with AI software, is that, we already touched on this earlier, that like hard technical skills isn't necessarily a must have for someone to be successful at technical support. But I think a lot of those sort of, you know, tier one type tickets are going to go away, whether it's because your help center is much better, whether it's because of software and tools, whether it's your support platform or AI, agentic AI software, people are going to get their answers hopefully more often before they actually reach the human beings on your team. And so when they get to the human beings on your team, it's going to be the more complex issues that require the really amazing people who are on your support team. And so I think that that goes back to like, well, what are we hiring for? And then that means that they need better support and resources too, so that they can tackle those challenging problems.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that there's a major shift there. Like you said, I think a lot of the level one needs are gonna be automated. They're gonna be self-serve, if not already. And there's a shift there. There's a major shift in the focus um, towards these knowledge operations to kind of power the tools for the level one stuff, especially. And then and at the same time, there's a deepening requirement for the technical aspects, those edge cases, those really difficult
Mhm.
needs, those things that are, they have too many different moving pieces to be solved by a single, self-serve answer, for example. Um, and that's a major shift, isn't it?
Yeah,
Um, when you think about this requirement, the new requirements, like if you had like a dream job posting and you're gonna hire like the perfect person, like what would you be looking for? Like the person who's kind of ready for the future, or ready for the leading the environment at a leading company today.
yeah. I mean, if I was thinking about this, I think, one thing is people who are like sort of excited by new technology, right? I think, you doesn't necessarily be the person who like, I built my own computer. Like, I never built a computer in my life. Um, but I, like learning how things work. So I think when I actually have thought about this in the past, the thing that comes to mind is people who are good at systems level thinking. Because that is, I mean, a lot of software, most software, it's a system, right?
Hmm.
And in your product, there's layers like, of systems within systems. And so if you can have like an understanding of being able to figure out how the system works, and you can understand when it's not working, and you can gain that sort of expertise in many avenues, right? Many different jobs. So it's not like a specific job or role that I would look for, but it's that systems level thinking. Because when I think back to people who have done really well in support, um, moved into not necessarily technical roles, but in other roles within support or outside of support, it's the folks who have that sort of understanding of systems and how the systems work together, and can see when they're not working together and sort of peel back the layers of the onion, so to speak, and be able to like pinpoint where something is maybe gone off the rails or not working as expected. And so it's more that it's that systems thinking, systems level thinking.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, and I agree with you. I think that like the human nature, that the instinctual kind of reaction is like, that on the surface level, like I'm experiencing this pain, or there's this problem or something that's going on. There's the lived experience, right? It's like what I'm seeing in front of me. But the root cause is not so obvious in most cases. And the more technical the product is, the more technical the environment, the more you need that systems thinking to kind of to peel it back and kind of dig in and
Hmm.
understand root cause, those interactions between the different moving pieces.
I think the other piece too is sort of like pattern recognition too, like put those things kind of put together. But I think even I think more important, or it's equally important, is that sort of being really driven by helping customers and improving the customer experience. Because, that to me is actually what makes hiring for a technical support role so difficult is, that's like that middle part of that Venn diagram of like, got the technical chops, but also have the customer experience support chops. Like the middle part of that Venn diagram is not as big as like I would I that I have had would have thought in the past. But I think that goes to your point about the level of like technical expertise and depth that is needed with these sort of shifts, is sort of resulting in that, little slice of that Venn diagram being a little smaller than it was, say, 10 years ago.
Yeah, and I think these, especially the recent wave of AI tools is it's coming so fast. It's arrived so quickly that anybody who tells you they're an expert, you have to be a little skeptical, because like, are there really any experts in something that's only been around for a few years? I mean, you might be relatively expert to somebody else, but if you compare that to like, a medical researcher in a field that's been around for decades, like the level of expertise here is pretty variable. And myself included, we're all kind of figuring this out. And obviously, I've spent a lot of time thinking about these things the last few years, many, many hours of independent, study by myself, and also through my, daily operation. But I think that when you're hiring, when you're looking for team members, when you're thinking about maybe if you were trying to get a job as an individual out there, um, you know, how much time have you dedicated to this in recent years, right? Have you been trying to really like be an early adopter, like stay up to date? Like, are you hungry for new information, or are you kind of sitting on the sidelines saying, "Oh, this AI thing, I'm not sure," right?
Yeah, and I think like even I think the thing that some people struggle with that is that like their personal sort of standpoint is that, not interested. But if you want to, be competitive, like right now, like being a support leader looking for a job is really tough. And so
Hmm.
I don't think you have that option to be like, I'm gonna opt out of this because personally, because I understand it. I feel guilty. For my personal life, I only try to use AI solutions if like I know it would take me through twice as long to do the thing
Hmm.
without. AI assistants because I still, feel a little bit bad about the like environmental implications and sort of the ethical implications. But um like I think it's sort of like non-negotiable that you need to, because I mean, I've looked at a lot of job postings just because, I'm always trying to help people I know send relevant postings their way and stuff. And I would say like I would think 80% of those jobs have some mention of like, implementing AI software.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that there's an understandable hesitation and there are various concerns people have for different reasons personally, which are totally justified.
Yeah.
I think that the I wanted to explore a little bit this idea of like what is the ideal again and what is the gap between, kind of the situation today and the ideal. Specifically in terms of like, you know, the ideal role of customer support. Because if you have the kind of the legacy of customer support, again, it's kind of like, all right, here's a ticket backlog, crush it as fast as you can, try to make customers happy while you're doing it. Um, Maybe spend a little time on the knowledge base. Maybe there's a
And
few
keep
other
costs
little
down.
things. Yeah, and like do it all on like a shoestring budget, right?
Yes.
um, but like, what do you see as like the final best version, and where are the gaps between where we are today and like what that would look like?
I think that, if I think about like, yeah, the final best version of what support is and should be, um, I think that it's like a value add, right? Like that it is not just, I hate the term like cost center, but
Hmm.
that, there's a wealth of information that comes in through your support team. Probably more than you get from other areas of the business. And so
100%.
being able to surface that to the business and be able to like my dream is that every support team can point to or illustrate how the support team, you know, contributed to like the top line, right? Um and so right now I think the struggle is like it's not always easy to be able to connect support data to those things. And so like that's where I want, like that to me is the ultimate like end, is that, you know, it's crystal clear and really easy for a support leader to show like, yep, this is the impact we had on our on revenue, on our brand value, um, whatever those, across multiple like facets on our product roadmap. And so that to me is like the pinnacle, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's some progress in that direction, and it depends on the tools that the team is using and the tools that the team can use. Um, but I think there's also just a thought process there, which is evolving pretty rapidly, I think. I mean, I've spoken to other support leaders like yourself who've echoed kind of similar sentiments about what they would like to see. So I think there's some increasing understanding of this broadly, but um, you're right. I mean, being able to connect action to impact for the business, right? In the language of the business that the other departments understand, that management understands, right? It's like here's the profit and loss, right? Like this is not just like, oh, fuzzy, like we're playing around. No, it's like straight line to profit, straight line to loss. Here's the money we saved. Here's the money you gained. This is why investing in this. This is why giving me a promotion or hiring this person, whatever. This is why it's justified, right? And I think that there's been this kind of underdog status of sport for a long time, and that narrative is shifting. Um, slowly, but it's shifting, and I think that things like attributing the data, right? Showing the numbers, showing the impact. That's a big piece of it. Being part of those conversations. I think there's a general um, kind of internal salesmanship skill, right? Being able to sell the results internally,
Mhm.
being able to speak the language is really big, and that's kind of business acumen that I think we all can continually improve. Um, But I think that there's a real capability with the tools these days to connect the dots and to
Yeah,
say, person came in, they took this action and then this action and then had this result for the business. And that is possible today, and maybe more
it
so than
is. It
people
is.
imagine.
Yeah, I think that for it's definitely possible today, but I think depending on the resources your support team has, how your data is structured, and sort of who has access to it also. And it's not, I would say, easy to do that today. But kind of going
Mm,
back to speaking their language, I remember going to my first like support conference I ever went to was Elevate CX, like a long, long time ago. And one of the talks was about, how do you get the other parts of the org to understand, like, to care about what customer support is like saying. And the takeaway was use their language. And the thing is, to me, I was like, duh, of course. This is what I tell my team all the time. Is like use the language our customers use because they are going to understand what you're trying to explain much more easily. They're going to like feel heard. And why wouldn't I have like thought to apply that to when I'm like emailing uh, a game producer or
mhm.
the QA manager, right? And so I thought it was just really um, uh, funny that you had mentioned that because yeah, that was like one of those things of like, oh yeah, my point isn't getting across when I'm just talking about like number of tickets created and the increase in tickets. But when I connect to like how many days these players are out locked out of their game and how many of them are paying players and like that translates to like revenue loss in monthly active
Mhm.
users. Um, and so it was just sort of like one of those aha moments for me. It was like, yeah, like intuitively I knew this, but I needed to hear it to be able to like put it into practice.
Yeah, I think, it's hard to imagine sometimes what's possible without seeing some examples. And this is true for everybody across disciplines. But I think that like the the opportunity, and you mentioned this before as well, the opportunity to act on the data that customer support has is massive. And if you take
Yes.
the initiative, you take that data that you uniquely have in front of you, that you know day to day, both the numbers, but also your experiences talking to customers. You take that, take the initiative, and maybe do a little homework about, the terminology that the marketing department cares about, or maybe, some of the aspects that the product team cares about. And then build a little report for them. It could be a simple one page, like, over the past month, we observed this, this, and this. Here's how we project this can impact profit and loss, right? Or, whatever the department goals are, the marketing or whoever, whichever department cares about. There's an initiative going on in the company, you could connect it to that. But if you write that one page report, it wouldn't take you a terribly long amount of time. But if you go into that conversation or if you send that email with, hey, here's something that we found that you care about. I know that you
Mhm.
care about this in this department. Here's something important and valuable for you. Well, suddenly you've elevated your status as like, oh, I'm a ticket taker. No, you're going far beyond ticket taker into like, oh my God, we just learned something that's going to have a big impact on our bottom line. Um, that totally transforms the conversation, right?
Yeah.
Um, so before we go here, I wanted to get your thoughts. Like, if you wanted to give some advice to people who are looking to advance their career, either as a customer support leader or people who are looking to get that next promotion, what would you recommend people look into or focus on?
Um, I mean, I think it can be a little dependent on what your like sort of ultimate goals are, but I think in general it's how can you have an impact in the role you have today, right? And I think, I touched on this a little bit before, is I think a lot of people are like, I answer tickets, calls, chats, like, how am I going to like show? And I mean, you can show there's areas and opportunity to, step up, be proactive. I think it's like being proactive. First, number one, kick butt at your current job, right? That is like, I think that's it should go without saying, but I think a lot of times that people who are eager to advance, which I think is amazing, forget that like part of what you're being sort of evaluated on is how awesome you are at the job you have today, right? So that's like baseline, right? Really, really become a master of your craft at the job you have today, even if it's not the job you want to have forever, right? Because there's a lot to be said for that, right? And I think like when I'm thinking about people I hire, I'm like, wow, this person is incredible at the job. And then, if you once you have that, like I am like top of my game at my role, and then find opportunities where you can sort of, provide a solution to a problem that has had the team stumped, right? Becoming a subject matter expert at something on your team where there's like a pretty big knowledge gap on the team, right? Um, and you know, continually being proactive and sort of like really nurturing your curiosity, right? Because that's the things that are going to be beneficial in pretty much almost any role you might want to move into. Kick butt at your current job and, find opportunities where you can sort of stretch yourself, become an expert in something, um, and sort of fill a gap, right? I think that's the thing, right? Like if you kind of proactively realize that there's like a knowledge gap or like, hey, we don't have any documentation on this thing, or, you know, there's got to be a better way for us to handle this specific type of escalation. And you say, hey, you know, I've identified this problem. Here's my like proposal for how we could do it. Or, just, hey, I solved this problem 3 times. I'm pretty sure like I've tested, I feel pretty good about it, and you kind of share that, document it. So it's like kind of filling those needs and gaps that are like exists on your team because every single team has those. Um, and depending on the structure of your team, it may be something that isn't officially owned by anyone. And so that's like those are real like amazing opportunities for you to really showcase how awesome you are, um, and how you are ready for that next step. But it always goes back to still being awesome at the job you have. And I think also being seen as a resource, right? Like being helpful to your teammates, I think is also really critical, whether it be moving into like a support engineer type role or a lead manager role or into another team. Like those are the things that people talk about when you're not in the room, right? Is, oh my gosh, Ben was so great at, mentoring these new people on the team, right?
Thank you.
Um, so I think that those are the sort of those 3 things: being like a resource to your teammates, genuinely helpful, not just to customers, but to the people around you,
Hmm.
being kicking butt at your job you have today, and then being able to find those sort of gaps that exist or where things could be improved and, you know, figure out how to make them better.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, and documenting along the way too is really big, right?
Hmm.
Like being able to show, sort of like the brag document, right? It's like, look, I
Exactly,
did this and this and
exactly.
this and this. Um, that's one technique I picked up recently that seemed to help. I think the landscape is changing. Um, the the requirements and the opportunities are changing, but um, I see that there's a lot of truth to what you're saying, that these people who are willing to fill the gaps, people are willing to take the initiative, especially if you can document it, you can communicate it in the language of the managers, you can communicate it in the language of results, right? You have data for your arguments. People are going to see a big impact in their career opportunities and their advancement,
Hmm.
as a leader. Um, Thank you so much, Stacy. I wanted to just shout out before we go that for everybody listening, Stacy is, in addition to a mentor, um, with a lot of experience in the field, she is also a career coach, and she provides services to people who are looking to advance their career through her personal business, which you can check out at doublejumpenterprises.com. Um, and yeah, and Stacy, thank you for joining. And for everybody out there, we'll see you again soon.